In the world of cryptocurrency, there are ghosts, legends of lost fortunes and digital empires that vanished overnight, leaving behind nothing but broken code and shattered dreams. For a decade, the greatest of these ghosts has laid dormant, a sealed tomb containing a king's ransom in Bitcoin. This isn't a metaphorical tomb. It's a legal fortress, constructed from Japanese bankruptcy law, guarded by trustees and auditors. Inside, an asset class that didn't exist 20 years ago has waited, multiplying in value 1,000-fold, silent and untouchable. But now, a seal is breaking. The name is Mt. Gox to a new generation of market participants. It might sound like a distant myth, but to the pioneers of the digital age, it is a name that evokes a sense of profound loss, a financial cataclysm that nearly destroyed the world's faith in a new technology. Before its spectacular collapse, Mt. Gox wasn't just an exchange, it was the exchange. Imagine a world where a single company processed 70% of every transaction for a global asset, not a bank, not a stock exchange, but a fledgling website run from a Tokyo office, built on the bones of a trading site for fantasy game cards. It was the only deep source of liquidity, the only trusted price oracle, the absolute center of the Bitcoin universe. It was the sun around which a tiny fragile ecosystem orbited. Then, in February 2014, it vanished, taking with it the hopes and life savings of thousands. The exchange didn't just die. It left behind a specter in the machine. A vast trove of digital gold, recovered from the wreckage, was locked away by courts and lawyers. For 10 years, it has been silent, the subject of a grueling legal marathon fought in sterile Tokyo courtrooms. Creditors watched helplessly as legal deadlines were pushed back year after year, as trustees changed, as the very definition of their property was debated, all while the value of their trapped assets exploded into the stratosphere. But now, that silence is about to end. A court-appointed trustee has uttered the words the market has dreaded for years. The creditors will be repaid. This isn't a promise of healing. It's a threat of volatility, a declaration that a financial force of nature is about to be unleashed on an unsuspecting market. We are not talking about a small tremor. We are talking about an earthquake. The trustee possesses approximately 142,000 Bitcoin at today's prices. That is a staggering sum, well over $9 billion. This isn't institutional money managed by disciplined funds with clear strategies. It's a treasure chest being handed over to thousands of individuals, early adopters who acquired their Bitcoin for mere dollars, sometimes cents. They are a cohort frozen in time, from an era before crypto became a household name. They've endured a decade of frustration, paperwork, and uncertainty. They are not today's hardened market veterans. They are the financial equivalent of a lost tribe, suddenly rediscovered. The question that haunts every analyst and market observer is simple and terrifying. What will they do? These are not the unwavering enthusiasts of today's market. They are the survivors of its first great disaster. They have every reason to convert these assets, to finally turn their digital mirage into tangible wealth. If a significant portion of them decide to liquidate at once, the market could face a supply shock unlike anything it has seen in years. The modern crypto market, with its complex derivatives and its high-frequency trading firms, sees itself as sophisticated and resilient, but it has never faced a test like this. A concentrated, psychologically driven event detached from typical market logic. This is the story of the Mt. Gox Payout. It is a decade-long legal drama culminating in a high-stakes economic experiment. The world is about to witness what happens when a $9 billion ghost returns to the world of the living. The fate of this $9 billion hoard rests on the individual decisions of thousands of people who have waited a decade for justice, a collective choice that could ripple across the entire digital asset space. To understand the forces at play requires a journey back to the beginning, and for more essential stories from the world of finance that you won't find anywhere else, make sure you subscribe. To understand the collapse, you must first understand the creators. The story of Mt. Gox does not begin in a sleek financial data center, but in the nerdy subculture of online gaming. The name itself is an acronym, Magic the Gathering Online Exchange. It was a side project, a digital card trading platform conceived in 2007 by Jed McCaleb, a brilliant but restless programmer known for creating the peer-to-peer network eDonkey. For him, Mt. Gox was a curiosity, but in 2010 McCaleb heard about Bitcoin, and a new idea sparked. He repurposed his card trading site into a place where people could swap this new, strange digital money. The timing was perfect. Bitcoin was a solution in search of a problem, and Mt. Gox became its first real marketplace. It was primitive, held together by digital duct tape, but it worked. It was the only game in town. McCaleb, however, wasn't interested in becoming a financial titan. He was a builder, not a manager. In early 2011, having run the exchange for less than a year, he found a buyer. The man who would take the keys to the kingdom was a French developer living in Tokyo named Marc Carpelise. The handover was astonishingly casual, a simple agreement that marked one of the most fateful transactions in crypto history. With that, the visionary founder stepped away, and the controversial custodian took his place. The contrast between The two men was the story of Mt. Gox itself. McCaleb was a quiet, respected figure in the open-source community. Carpeles was an eccentric, corpulent figure with a reputation for arrogance and a love of the spotlight. He saw himself as the leader of the Bitcoin revolution, a digital baron presiding over a new financial empire. He moved the company into a chic office in Shibuya, Tokyo, a move meant to signal legitimacy and power. But inside those walls, a culture of chaos and incompetence took root. Reports from former employees paint a picture of a CEO utterly out of his depth. Carpeles was a micromanager obsessed with trivialities, yet dangerously neglectful of the company's core function, securing billions of dollars in customer assets. While critical security infrastructure languished, he poured company resources into side projects, like a Bitcoin cafe to be run out of the same building. His focus was on the performance, not the plumbing. The microscenes of the decay were telling. There were the frantic calls from partners like CoinLab, a US company that had licensed the Mt. Gox platform. They would beg for access to audit records and warn of glaring accounting discrepancies, only to be met with delays and dismissive excuses from Carpeles. He treated the company's finances like a personal fiefdom, opaque and unquestionable. Then came the ghosts in the machine. On the exchange itself, strange activity began to surface. Traders noticed bots, which they nicknamed Willie and Marcus, placing enormous nonsensical orders. These bots were operating with phantom funds, buying Bitcoin with money that didn't exist, creating artificial volume and inflating the price. This wasn't just a glitch. It was a deception, a way to paint a picture of a healthy, liquid market while the exchange was hemorrhaging real money behind the scenes. The system was rotting from the inside out. For the public, the first sign that the ship was taking on water came not as a crash, but as a slow, grinding halt. By late 2013, withdrawals began to fail. A simple request to move funds off the exchange would get stuck in a pending status for days, then weeks. Customer support tickets went unanswered. On internet forums, the whispers grew into a roar of panic. The digital bank run had begun in slow motion. Mark Carpeles, the self-styled king of crypto, projected an aura of calm. He blamed the delays on a technical bug in the Bitcoin network itself, a flaw known as transaction malleability. It was a brilliant piece of technical misdirection. The flaw was real, allowing a transaction's unique ID to be altered before confirmation. Carpeles claimed this was how hackers were tricking the system into rescinding withdrawals. It was complex, enough that most users couldn't refute it, and it shifted blame from Mt. Gox's own fragile systems to the core Bitcoin code. But while he was weaving this public narrative, a frantic last-ditch audit was taking place internally. As engineers tried to reconcile the exchange's wallets, they came face-to-face with a black hole. The numbers on their database, the assets they were supposed to be holding for customers, were a fantasy. The Bitcoin simply wasn't there. Hundreds of thousands of coins had been siphoned off over years. A slow, silent bleed that had gone unnoticed due to catastrophic accounting practices. The king was presiding over an empty treasury. The collapse was no longer a possibility. It was a mathematical certainty. The lie about transaction malleability was a brilliant, temporary shield. But behind it, the reality was a scene from a disaster film. The internal audit had confirmed the worst. The exchange was insolvent on a scale that was difficult to comprehend. For years, hackers had been exploiting a fundamental flaw in Mt. Gox's own hastily written code. The theft wasn't a single, dramatic event, but a slow, methodical siphoning of the exchange's hot wallet, the digital equivalent of a leaky faucet draining an entire reservoir. Carpeles and his inner circle had likely known about the growing discrepancy for months, possibly longer. But instead of halting operations and coming clean, they chose deception. The Willy bot was their desperate, fraudulent attempt to trade their way out of the deficit, using phantom money to acquire real Bitcoin to try and plug the hole. It was a gambler's final, ruinous bet, executed with other people's money. The entire operation had become a Potemkin village, a glittering facade hiding an empty vault. While the world saw the #1 Bitcoin exchange, the insiders knew they were captaining a ghost ship, sailing toward a guaranteed iceberg. The breaking point came not from an official announcement, but from a leak. A document, titled Crisis Strategy Draft, appeared online, spreading through forums and chat rooms like wildfire. Its contents were explosive. It bluntly stated that 744,408 Bitcoin were missing, likely stolen, a loss amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars at the time. The document painted a grim picture of insolvency and proposed a desperate plan for a shutdown and relaunch, under a new brand. For the global crypto community, reading this document was like intercepting an enemy's battle plans. The lie was exposed. The scale of the disaster was now public. The slow-motion bank run became a stampede. In Tokyo, the digital crisis manifested in the physical world. A small, desperate group of international creditors began to gather outside the Shibuya office building. They held handwritten signs, pleading for information, for their life savings. One protester, Colin Burgess, became the face of the movement, a symbol of the ordinary user caught in the gears of a corporate collapse. Day after day, He stood vigil, a lonely sentinel broadcasting the unfolding disaster to a global audience via a live stream. Their presence was a stark contrast to the silence from within the building. Mark Karpeles, the man with all the answers, was nowhere to be seen. Then, on February 24, 2014, the final sequence began. The CEO resigned from the board of the Bitcoin Foundation, a symbolic severing of ties with the community he claimed to lead. Trading on Mt. Gox, which had been erratic for weeks, ceased entirely a few hours later. The website itself went dark. Visitors were met not with charts and order books, but with a blank white page. The silence was deafening. The central hub of the entire Bitcoin economy, the place where its price was discovered and its future was debated, had simply ceased to exist. In one final bizarre message posted online, Mark Karpeles claimed he was in Japan and working to resolve the issues. But everyone knew the truth. It was over. The king was gone, the castle was empty, and the treasure had vanished. The greatest heist in digital history was complete, and the long, dark winter for its thousands of victims was just beginning. In the vacuum left by the exchange's disappearance, a global investigation began. An army of online researchers, victims, and journalists scrutinized the public Bitcoin ledger, the permanent record of all transactions, searching for the digital trail of the missing coins. The internet was a maelstrom of theories, accusations, and grief. Mt. Gox was more than a company. It was the financial nexus for a generation of early adopters, and its failure felt like a deep and personal betrayal. Then, on March 7, 2014, the story took a stunning turn. Mark Karpeles emerged from seclusion to announce he had found approximately 200,000 Bitcoin while reviewing old digital wallets. The explanation given was that a forgotten wallet format from before June 2011 had been overlooked. To creditors, this story was difficult to accept. Was it a case of profound incompetence, or a calculated reveal of a hidden reserve only after the company's collapse? Regardless of the motive, this discovery was the pivotal event of the post-collapse saga. It transformed the Mt. Gox bankruptcy from a scenario of total loss into a recovery operation. These 200,000 coins became the core asset of the legal process that would unfold over the next decade. While this offered a sliver of hope, the Japanese justice system began to move. The focus shifted from the missing funds to the individual in charge of them. In August 2015, Mark Karpeles was arrested by Tokyo police. The charges were not for the loss of customer funds, but for more direct offenses: data manipulation and embezzlement. Prosecutors alleged he had manipulated his own cash balance on the exchange and diverted millions in customer money to personal accounts. His trial became a secondary plotline to the main event, the bankruptcy itself. The Tokyo District Court appointed a trustee, Nobuaki Kobayashi, to manage the liquidation of Mt. Gox's remaining assets. He was the antithesis of Karpeles: cautious, formal, and silent. For years, his only communication with the thousands of international creditors was through dense legal documents uploaded to a website. Under the initial bankruptcy plan, Kobayashi's role was to sell the remaining assets and distribute the cash. But a new legal dilemma emerged. Japanese law valued claims at the time of the 2014 bankruptcy filing, when a Bitcoin was priced around $480. As the legal proceedings continued, the market price of Bitcoin climbed dramatically. Selling the recovered assets at these new market rates would generate billions of dollars. After paying creditors based on the original $480 per coin claim, a massive surplus would remain. By law, that surplus would go to the shareholders of the defunct Mt. Gox, primarily Mark Karpeles. This created a scenario that creditors there found intolerable. The prospect galvanized them, transforming them from scattered victims into an organized legal force. They petitioned the court to shift the case into a different process called civil rehabilitation. This petition became the central focus of their legal fight. A successful move would mean the assets would not be liquidated for cash. Instead, the actual Bitcoin could be returned directly to them. After a long and difficult fight, the Tokyo court agreed in June 2018. It was a pivotal legal victory. The creditors had successfully navigated the legal system to protect their assets, ensuring the recovered funds would be theirs. The stage was now set for the final act, though no one knew it would take another 6 years to begin. The collapse of Mt. Gox was more than just the failure of a single company. It was the foundational trauma of the entire cryptocurrency world. For the early believers, Bitcoin was not merely an asset, it was a philosophical movement, a technological declaration of independence from a corrupt and fragile traditional financial system that promised transparency, decentralization, and individual sovereignty. Mt. Gox represented the first great betrayal of that promise. It demonstrated, in the most brutal way possible, that the ideals of a decentralized network could be completely undermined by the failures of a centralized custodian. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. The price of Bitcoin, which had breached $1,000 for the first time just months earlier, entered a devastating multi-year bear market. The event triggered the first true crypto winter, a prolonged period of despair where many declared the entire experiment dead. The media narrative, once cautiously optimistic, turned uniformly hostile. Bitcoin became synonymous with scams, hacks, and the dark web. The public image of crypto was cemented as a lawless Wild West, a perception the industry still struggles to overcome to this day. The stakes for the 24,000 creditors were stark and deeply personal. They were not faceless institutions but individuals, software developers, early tech adopters, libertarians, and small-time speculators who had taken a risk on a revolutionary idea. They had entrusted their assets to what they believed was a professional financial service, only to have them vanish. The consequence for them was not just a financial loss. It was the shattering of a worldview. They were forced to watch from the sidelines as the technology they had championed continued to evolve, its value soaring to unimaginable heights, while their own stake in that revolution was locked away in a legal black hole. The psychological toll of the decade-long wait cannot be overstated. These creditors had a front-row seat to one of the greatest wealth creation events in modern history, but they were chained to their chairs, unable to participate. They saw their trapped assets, valued at just a few $1 million in 2014, swell into a multi-billion-dollar fortune. This wasn't a lottery ticket. It was their property, a digital ghost that haunted their personal balance sheets. For the broader crypto ecosystem, the consequences were a painful but necessary lesson. The failure of Mt. Gox gave birth to a core tenet of the community. Not your keys, not your coins. It was a rallying cry for self-custody, a warning that trusting a third party with your digital assets was a dangerous gamble. This principle fueled the development of hardware wallets and decentralized exchanges, pushing the industry toward more robust and secure solutions. Every subsequent exchange collapse, from Quadriga CX to FTX, has been viewed through the lens of Mt. Gox. Its ghost looms over the industry, a permanent reminder of the dangers of centralization and mismanagement. The legal battle itself became a high-stakes drama with profound consequences. The initial bankruptcy proceeding threatened a truly perverse outcome, paying creditors their pittance from 2014 and awarding the multi-billion-dollar surplus to Mark Carpley. This would have been a moral catastrophe, a signal that the system rewards failure on a spectacular scale. The creditors' successful fight to switch to civil rehabilitation was therefore a fight for justice, not just for themselves, but for the integrity of the entire space. It ensured that the recovered assets would flow to the victims, not the architect of their loss. This victory, however, set the stage for the very market event we face today. By preserving the assets as Bitcoin instead of cash, the creditors created the $9 billion time bomb that is now ticking. The final act of the Mt. Gox saga is not just about settling old debts. It's about the market absorbing the financial fallout of a decade-old catastrophe, a final, dramatic echo of the original collapse. With the rehabilitation plan approved, the final villain in the saga is not a person or a legal code, but a force of nature, market psychology. For years, the timeline for repayment was a vague, ever-shifting horizon. The methodical takedown of this uncertainty arrived in the form of a single, hard deadline announced in an official document. All repayments would be made by October 31, 2024. This single date transformed the abstract fear into a concrete, observable event window. The clock was now officially ticking. The trustee's strategy is a carefully sequenced multi-stage process, designed to dismantle the $9 billion problem piece by piece. The first strike was aimed at the simplest part of the problem, the cash. In late 2023 and early 2024, a small number of creditors began reporting that they had received the Japanese yen portion of their repayment. These were small amounts, but each successful bank transfer was a proof of concept that the machinery of repayment actually worked. This set up the next, far more consequential phase. In May of 2024, blockchain analysts observed a massive movement of Bitcoin from wallets known to belong to the Mt. Gox estate. Over several hours, 141,000 Bitcoin were consolidated from numerous cold storage addresses into a single new address. This was the trustee marshalling the assets for the final push. The market's reaction was immediate and visceral. The price of Bitcoin dipped sharply as automated trading systems reacted to the on-chain data, misinterpreting the move as a precursor to an imminent market sale. The trustee, in a rare moment of public communication, issued a statement to calm the nerves, clarifying these movements were purely preparatory. The statement was a temporary truce with a nervous market. The fallout is now playing out in real time. In the data centers of high-frequency trading firms, algorithms are being recalibrated to watch for the ghost. On the trading floors of crypto hedge funds, analysts are modeling various liquidation scenarios. The fallout extends into a secondary market where firms like Fortress Investment Group, having bought up claims from desperate creditors for pennies on the dollar, are now among the largest claimants, preparing to act with clinical and sentimental precision. In the creditor communities on Reddit and Telegram, the reactions are intensely personal. A post titled "It's Finally Real" featuring a screenshot of an email from the trustee receives thousands of upvotes. Another user posts a simple, anonymous message for 10 years. My Gox Bitcoin has been a phantom number on a legal document. Soon it will be a down payment on a home for my family. These posts provide a human face to the abstract financial event, reminding the wider community of the real people at the center of the story. The entire montage of reactions, the fear, the analysis, the personal stories, and the security alerts creates a complex and often contradictory information environment. The fallout from Mt. Gox is not a single coherent event, but a million different conversations happening at once, a global dialogue about risk, patience, and the final closing of crypto's most notorious chapter. The entire market now hinges on a simple question: what will thousands of individual creditors do? One theory predicts a massive liquidation, as victims of a decade-old trauma finally cash out life-changing gains. The other suggests these are the original believers, who may choose to retain their long-lost assets. The final act of Mt. Gox is more than a financial event. It's a referendum on the market's maturity, the closing of a painful chapter from crypto's past. To see what happens when a modern banking titan faces its own spectacular collapse, and who is left to foot the bill, watch our deep dive into another epic financial failure. The full story of Credit Suisse gives you BS how a brand dies and who pays for it is on the on-screen card for you to watch now. This victory, however, set the stage for the very market event we face today. By preserving the assets as Bitcoin instead of cash, the creditors created the $9 billion time bomb that is now ticking. The final act of the Mt. Gox saga is not just about settling old debts. It's about the market absorbing the financial fallout of a decade-old catastrophe, a final, dramatic echo of the original collapse. With the rehabilitation plan approved, the final villain in the saga is not a person or a legal code, but a force of nature, market psychology. For years, the timeline for repayment was a vague, ever-shifting horizon. The methodical takedown of this uncertainty arrived in the form of a single hard deadline announced in an official document: all repayments would be made by October 31, 2024. This single date transformed the abstract fear into a concrete, observable event window. The clock was now officially ticking. The Trustee strategy is a carefully sequenced multi-stage process, designed to dismantle the $9 billion problem piece by piece. The first strike was aimed at the simplest part of the problem, the cash. In late 2023 and early 2024. A small number of creditors began reporting that they had received the Japanese yen portion of their repayment. These were small amounts, but each successful bank transfer was a proof of concept that the machinery of repayment actually worked. This set up the next, far more consequential phase. In May of 2024, blockchain analysts observed a massive movement of Bitcoin from wallets known to belong to the Mt. Gox estate. Over several hours, 141,000 Bitcoin were consolidated from numerous cold storage addresses into a single new address. This was the Trustee marshalling the assets for the final push. The market's reaction was immediate and visceral. The price of Bitcoin dipped sharply as automated trading systems reacted to the on-chain data, misinterpreting the move as a precursor to an imminent market sale. The Trustee, in a rare moment of public communication, issued a statement to calm the nerves, clarifying these movements were purely preparatory. The statement was a temporary truce with a nervous market. The fallout is now playing out in real time. In the data centers of high-frequency trading firms, algorithms are being recalibrated to watch for the ghost. On the trading floors of crypto hedge funds, analysts are modeling various liquidation scenarios. The fallout extends into a secondary market where firms like Fortress Investment Group, having bought up claims from desperate creditors for pennies on the dollar, are now among the largest claimants, preparing to act with clinical, unsentimental precision. In the creditor communities on Reddit and Telegram, the reactions are intensely personal. A post titled "It's Finally Real," featuring a screenshot of an email from the Trustee, receives thousands of upvotes. Another user posts a simple, anonymous message: "For 10 years, my Gox Bitcoin has been a phantom number on a legal document. Soon it will be a down payment on a home for my family." These posts provide a human face to the abstract financial event, reminding the wider community of the real people at the center of the story. The entire montage of reactions, the fear, the analysis, the personal stories, and the security alerts creates a complex and often contradictory information environment. The fallout from Mt. Gox is not a single, coherent event, but a million different conversations happening at once. A global dialogue about risk, patience, and the final closing of crypto's most notorious chapter. The entire market now hinges on a simple question: what will thousands of individual creditors do? One theory predicts a massive liquidation, as victims of a decade-old trauma finally cash out life-changing gains. The other suggests these are the original believers, who may choose to retain their long-lost assets. The final act of Mt. Gox is more than a financial event. It's a referendum on the market's maturity, the closing of a painful chapter from crypto's past. To see what happens when a modern banking titan faces its own spectacular collapse, and who is left to foot the bill, watch our deep dive into another epic financial failure. The full story of Credit Suisse gives you BS how a brand dies and who pays for it is on the on-screen card for you to watch now.